verbunden.
O planeta é gelé piso vert.
Und wir Menschen sind Teil dieses Ökosystems.
Nós somos a floresta.
Wir sind der Wald.
I can no longer afford to just sit and wait for someone else to step up.
There has never been a time when a single individual had more power in the history of our planet.
I was born with this huge passion for animals and for wildlife, with desire to protect them. And I want to fight back for them.
Und dieser Traum bewegt, glaube ich, immer mehr Menschen auf dieser Welt.
By taking peaceful action, you make change.
Follow your heart, break the rules,
and make history.
So law has created this problem, and law can amend it.
Die Erde heizt sich auf, wir sterben bald aus.
When you live in exceptional times, you need people who break rules.
The changes are so much faster than we predicted.
Macht endlich etwas gegen die Klimakrise.
Wer schaut schon in einen Massenstall hinein?
Dass jetzt die UN erkannt hat, dass Tierschutz wirklich ein Gamechanger ist.
Und jene Dörfer überschwemmen, jene Wälder brennen und jene letzten Reserven auf Erden verderben.
I don't think the planet stands a chance if we allow that corruption to proceed.
Und gegen dieses System aufzutreten, das ist etwas, was wir alle gemeinsam tun müssen.
Mas nós também somos a solução.
Aber wir sind auch die Lösung.
What we give our children is so important, to be outdoors, to be barefoot, to touch the soil.
Wenn die 900 Menschen hier 5 weitere inspirieren.
Damit wir gemeinsam irgendetwas ändern können.
Um wirklich was zu bewegen, muss man manchmal wirklich auf den Tisch hauen.
You don't have to be black, you don't have to be Austrian, you don't have to be German, you don't have to be anything. All you have to be is a human being that shows up.
Neon Green Network begrüßt Sie zu den Erdgesprächen.
Neon Green Network welcomes you most cordially to the 2024 Earth Talks. If you fight for the future of the planet, for our own future as human beings, then automatically you are confronted with a myriad of emotions, of feelings. For example, you read something about environmental catastrophes that happen ever more frequently, and you might feel something like fear deep within you. Or you stand here with your fairly traded soap, enjoying a shower, and you have made a trip through the entire city to get it, and then you hear about an event on the radio where thousands of people fly to with a private jet, and this gives rise to a lot of anger. Or you go shopping and you see that piece by piece sustainably produced, fairly traded products get ever more space on the shelves, and it feels like departing to new horizons. Or you develop intense feelings if you talk to other people who have become active in order to change the status quo, and you feel this connectedness and pride and also hope. And especially as concerns pride and hope, that we have a lot of store for you. So our speakers will give us fodder for thought. They are going to inspire us. They are going to give us hope for change, for getting things in motion. This is our task today, our goal today, and I'm sure that we are going to reach this goal. A most cordial welcome to Hall E of the Museums Quarter. A most cordial welcome to the 15th Earth Talks. It's so great to have you. And it's not only great to have you, but it's so great that we have so many people who have joined us via the live stream. This is absolutely amazing. My name is Mathias Pascottini, and I always talk whenever our experts are taking a breath, and will be your host. Our motto is back to the roots. What do we need for a good life, we activists? What do we need in order to sustain our planet, and what will be the impact on the generations to come? Talking about back to the roots, our guests of honor are true regulars here, and we are very happy that they are on board and they support the Earth Talks. Doris Schmiedauer, Alexander van der Bellen, most cordial welcome to you. And there are so many people here. So we have managers of environmental NGOs, so many school classes, school students and teachers who have accompanied their pupils. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your support. A very important note before we get started, the presentations and talks here on stage are just one part of the Earth Talks. A second important talk will take place afterwards, your Earth Talks. We cordially invite you to stick around, to have a chat, to forge plans and to establish contacts. And this is so important for the Earth Talks and another goal of ours. But now I would like to present to you the people who will be our main protagonists tonight. They are going to talk about their experiences and they are going to talk about the things that they have learned along the way. Climate activist and a land use expert Lina Burnelius, a most cordial welcome. Cordial welcome. Please take a seat. Cordial welcome to human rights and environmental activist Ben RAWLENCE. A cordial welcome. And GABRIEL PAUN, nature conservationist and animal rights activist. So please take a seat. Also Sylvia is on board. This is absolutely great. So there are some dogs who really enjoy applause, but I think she doesn't care. So we are going to share the legroom tonight. Before we start with the keynotes, and we are going to get someone on stage who is very, very busy, so it is a great honor to have him on stage. Thank you very much for having taken over the patronage of this event. A most cordial welcome to Austrian Federal President Alexander van der Bellen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here again and to be able to open the 15th Earth Talks on a formal note. First of all, I would like to say that giving a speech here is not easy and concentrating on the contents. So what are the new things that I could tell you? So if all this sounds familiar to you, so please bear with me, be indulgent with me. So which perspective could I share with you that you are not familiar with anyway? So I will try to broach a few perspectives, to talk a little bit about my former life. Now I'm a federal president, but formerly I was an economist, an economic expert, and the economist in me in the climate crisis, on top of emotional aspects and on top of environmental aspects, also sees a very important economic topic. The extreme weather events that we are confronted with are tragic. Yes, we have seen places where people waded knee-deep in the brown water. We have seen children's rooms filled with mud. We have seen people who were extremely devastated, who have lost their livelihoods. the very basis of their existence, and if the worst comes to worst, they die. The damage created by such disasters cannot be expressed in figures alone, but the damages that happen to material goods, train lines, for example, this is something that we can truly express in figures. So these are just rough estimates. Let's talk about the flood in Lower Austria. 1.3 billion euros will have to be expended for this. So the flood in June in the south of Germany, 4 billion euros in damages. The Hurricane Helene in the US, this cost $10 billion in terms of damages. I also read about $150 billion in the Financial Times. We always have to be very, very careful if figures are mentioned as to damages. This means the damages that are paid by the insurance. But of course, the damage that has happened overall is much higher. Talking about Milton in Florida, so there will be two-digit billion figures. So these are enormous sums, and for some individuals this means that their livelihoods have been destroyed. In the US, meanwhile, many insurances in certain regions where there is a high frequency of environmental disasters, so they really exit the business. So you cannot insure your house anymore against adverse weather event, but if you cannot do this, you won't get a mortgage loan. So the demographic structure in the US is going to change markedly in the medium to long term. The Earth is warming up, and this costs a lot of money. And of course, you might ask yourself, wouldn't it have been cheaper to put a halt to global warming in the first place? Yes, of course. For many decades, so we had the knowledge. So we knew that the emission of greenhouse gas emissions would have negative consequences, and in the business world, the phenomenon of negative external effects has been discussed for many years, so effects that cannot be solved by the market alone. And this is called market failure, and the greenhouse gas effect is part and parcel of these problems. It constitutes the biggest market failure of all times. So now, at the very latest, I think it is worthwhile to invest in the energy transition, environmental protection. I think I'm carrying coals to Newcastles here. So this is important for the future of our children, for our own survival on this beautiful planet. And for those of you among you, maybe out there, for those of you for which these reasons are not sufficient, I would like to add another reason. Climate protection saves a lot of money. Measures against global warming are an excellent investment. Of course, this investment costs a lot of money, but sitting back and twiddling our thumbs will be much more expensive than investing now in the long run. And you know what we get in turn. So I have a whole list that I've prepared here, but what I like very much is humming meadows. This is what we will get in return. Did you ever notice that we really have problems in terms of biodiversity, and you see this every time you take a walk, and you might be happy if you're strolling through the province of Burgenland and you see that there are fewer mosquitoes, but this means that our mosquitoes, that our birds will starve. Doris and me, we visited an open-air concert, and there was not one single mosquito that stung us, and this made us nervous. Time is of the essence. This is something I would like to stress, because we get closer and closer to so-called tipping points. So these are dynamic processes, and once they have gotten into motion, they are irreversible. A typical example of this are permafrost soils in Siberia, but there is also some good news, and I would like to concentrate on the good news now. There are not only negative but also positive tipping points, for example, moments starting from which renewable solutions are more inexpensive than classic fossil solutions. Wind energy, photovoltaics, in many parts of the world, these alternative energies have become much more inexpensive than gas or coal. So some things have gotten into motion, some sort of domino effect, leading us towards an excellent future. And I think this could give us reason for confidence. For all of us, not only the economists, and I'm sure that we can master many tasks. That there are not only apocalyptic tasks, of course we have to take a close look, but there are also chain reactions leading us into a good future if we, globally speaking, not only in Austria, not only in Europe, if we pull in concert and join forces, and especially for this, we have come together here. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have the pleasure to declare the EARTHtalks 2024 open, but please bear with me. As opposed to what I've done during previous occasions, I can no longer stay with you. I wish you all interesting EARTHtalks, inspiring talks, and excellent networking. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Federal President Alexander van der Bellen. So he has to leave, and we need an additional input now before we get started with the first talk on stage. One information, there will be some interviews and there will be the inputs of our speakers that will be held in English. If you need translation, we have prepared some translation devices for you. And you can listen to the language that you need. Please don't be shy, just drop by. If you see that after the first 3 or 4 minutes, it is much too fast, so please don't be shy and get a translation device. So let's get started with our first speaker. Ben RAWLENCE is an award-winning writer, activist, and founder of the Black Mountains College in Wales, which was founded in response to the climate and environmental catastrophe to promote creative and adaptive thinking. He studied history at the School of Oriental and African Studies and completed his master's degree in international politics at the University of Chicago. RAWLENCE worked in the Africa department of Human Rights Watch. He has written for the New York Times and The Guardian, among others. His first book, Radio Congo, Signals of Hope from Africa's Deadliest War, was published in 2012, followed by City of Thorns, 9 Lives in the World's Largest Refugee Camp in 2016. His latest book, The Tree Line, The Last Forest and the Future of Life on Earth, is about the Arctic tree line of the boreal forests and their destruction by climate change, colonialism and capitalism. Neon Green Network presents Ben RAWLENCE.
Good evening. Guten Abend, Vienna. I'm on the spot. I'm from Wales, which is in the cold, wet, northwest corner of Europe. We're not in the European Union anymore, but we are still on the European continent. You can't argue with geography, as we are all finding out. Now, I'm not an academic, I'm not a professor, but I'm here representing a very small new university founded focusing on climate change. But my background, as you've just heard, is as a writer, as a storyteller. And as we know at this moment in history, we need new stories like never before. And that's really what this story that I'm going to tell you about shortly is for. It's about thinking of new stories, new ways of thinking about ourselves and our planet and that relationship between the two. So I'm going to take you on a journey, a very short journey up to Wales, but we're going to go the long way round. And I've forgotten my clicker, but I just want to click so you can see a slide. If somebody else can do that for me, or I can come and get the machine. There we are. Shall I take it? Let me take it to do the next one. So the first one is this. So we're going to go to Wales, but we're going to go via Russia, Canada, and Greenland. And we're going to start in Africa. As you saw there, I wrote several previous books about Africa. And about 15 years ago, I was working in the Horn of Africa, covering famine and drought and what was coming to be called at that time climate-driven conflict in the Horn of Africa. Now, I came back to the UK and I was curious, what's going to happen here in Europe if we're seeing these kinds of effects in a very sensitive place in the Horn of Africa, in the Sahel region already? And I started to ask questions. And the more I researched, the more alarmed I became. And one of the most alarming things I came across was this concept of the trees moving north. Not the individual trees moving, but the forest as a whole moving north, turning the white Arctic green. And I thought, wow, how come I've never heard of this before? Other people need to know about this as well. I want to tell other people about this. So I went north to the Arctic, and the first place I went was to Norway. And I phoned up the head of the Sami Reindeer Herding Association in a town called Kautokeino, and I said, I'm interested in the tree line, in the moving trees. Can you tell me anything about that? And the guy on the other end of the phone started laughing. He said, I'm 50 years old. When I was born, the town of Kautokeino was in the middle of the tundra. Now it's in the middle of the forest. This process has been going on for 100 years already, of the forest moving north into the tundra, but we haven't heard about it. So this fact propelled me then around to continue looking into this question. And this next slide is an image from the very farthest north you can get on land in Russia, which is a place called the Taimyr Peninsula. And I was trying to reach the northernmost growing limit of trees. And to get there, you have to fly east of Moscow and then north for a similar amount of time until you get to Katanga, and you drive on the Katanga River for about 3 days in an awful vehicle called a trekol. And possibly you hope to have better companions than I had, which was 2 Russians called Kolya and Kolya. And Kolya like very much weapons and vodka, and they don't believe in climate change. And we drove for 4 days, and finally we got to the northernmost limit of the trees, and we saw these beautiful, tiny larch trees, about this high, 400 years old. And we compared the images with the ones I'd been given by scientists 20 years earlier, and it was exactly the same. And Kolya were delighted. They said, you see, Greta is lying. It's a hoax. But of course, while other forests are moving north, like in Norway, Canada, Alaska, in Siberia, it's still too cold. So the temperature had risen by 30 degrees. The average was no longer minus 60, it was minus 30, but still not enough for the trees to start moving. So Collier and Collier were delighted, and I was very shamed by them, but I was delighted to be there. However, the reason I want to show you this picture again of the treacle is because there was another thing that Collier and Collier did listen to, and that is that in the ice on the river, we came across bubbles. And if you put a pin in the bubbles and you light it with a cigarette lighter, you get a flame. And that's because these bubbles contain methane. And you've all heard of permafrost melting on land, but the permafrost on the ocean is way more scary because it doesn't have the covering of trees and of snow. And now that we're losing the polar ice, the sun's rays heat that black seabed, and they heat it up, and it releases more methane much faster than what's happening on land. So this, for me, was another big moment. Why had I not heard about this before? What does this mean? These things like, these tipping points like permafrost, like the Gulf Stream system of currents in the Atlantic, these are very big Earth systems which move very slowly. So the real lesson from that journey around the Arctic Circle, and from there I went to Alaska, to Canada, to Greenland, and then back home to Wales. I would love to stay here for an hour and tell you the stories of all of those places because they're wonderful. But please read the book instead if you'd like to find those out. But the thing I want to emphasize is, having made that journey, I was struck by a couple of things. Firstly, as we say in American, holy cow. I think in German the word is Scheiße. We are in deep Scheiße. We are in deep shit. This is a big problem. And we can't slow this down. We can't stop this from happening. We can slow it down, but we can't stop it from happening. So what do we do? What does that mean in practice? Part of the reason why we're in such a mess, part of the reason why we hear the same thing from our leaders again and again about net zero, about the challenge of climate change, and yet nobody seems able to deliver political change, is because this is not just a scientific problem. It's not just a political problem to be solved with policies. This is a problem of values, of culture, in fact, it's the coda of a 500-year journey of European civilization that has taken us away from nature, that has caused us to see ourselves as separate from nature. It's an intractable problem. And I have a lot of sympathy for politicians, that some of whom I used to work with, who have tried to make change, but who are working in a political environment which is constrained by our society, our economic habits. We are all unsustainable. We are wearing unsustainable things. We are eating unsustainable things every day. And therefore, that brought me then to the question of my own action. What can I do now with this understanding, having met all of these, in many cases, indigenous communities living in the forest, whose culture and way of life was being challenged by the changes that are underway. And I came to the conclusion that this is about culture. At the same time, I was a young parent. I've got two young daughters, thinking, if this is a problem of culture, and I am living in an unsustainable culture, and the job of being a parent is about transmission of culture, then how do I interrupt that process? How do I stop transmitting an unsustainable culture to my children? And how do we as a society stop transmitting an unsustainable culture to our children. We have to somehow interrupt that transmission. We have to do things differently. So that's where I came upon the principle of education. Education is also about transmission. That is the place where we inculcate morals and values and ethics, where we teach people to think critically, teach our young people to think critically about the world, and to try and imagine their role in the future, and to try and imagine the world differently. So, having worked in journalism and human rights and politics, and working at that front line of policy change, I took a step back. I went back to the woods, or back to the roots. And in Wales, I founded this college called Black Mountains College, which is designed to try and reimagine education for an era of climate change. Essentially, we're trying to reimagine the society that we want to have after climate change. Because this process is, as I said, unstoppable. The only question mark is how fast it moves and how much the amount of change. And what that means in practice, in terms of what the kind of education that we're building there, is that we have to redefine not just what we teach, but also how we teach and where we teach. So you may have heard of this concept of head, hands, and heart. Learning is not just about the logos, the words, the things that happen between the things that happen in your head. You have to engage emotion, you have to engage practical experience at the same time. So we teach outside as much as possible, where nature is the classroom. It's the fundamental principle of the forest school movement. Some people have called Black Mountains College Forest School for Grown-ups. That's a fair description. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach outside in nature, because if we want to be reimagining a new way of doing things for a new kind of civilization, then we need to be doing it in nature. We need to see ourselves as part of nature. And we also then need to be learning from nature. So that other part about the experiential learning is how we learn with our whole bodies. The other thing is the subject. So climate literacy, why did I not know about the boreal forest? Why was that not taught to me in school? Why did I not even understand about climate change until I started to do my own research? What failure of the media, the government, the public education programs had led to a supposedly intelligent man, aged 30-something, not knowing these fundamental facts? Article 12 of the Paris Treaty places a duty on governments to undertake public education. The UN report says no government is actively fulfilling that criteria. So climate literacy, just as important as numeracy and as linguistic literacy. So we put that at the heart of our curriculum. We teach in this holistic way, and we teach in nature outside. So altogether, what that does is it creates, we hope, we've only a year to year 4, we've got 80 students, we're hoping for many more, but what we hope that creates is young people who have a different sense of their role in the world, a different sense of their relationship to nature, and a different sense of their relationship with each other, with their peers. Because there are some other fundamental principles that we can learn from nature, from the forest. And one of them is thinking like a forest. Now, you're familiar with the classic interpretation of evolution that Darwin put forward, that we have selfish genes and we have a competitive evolutionary spirit which leads to speciation and the survival of the fittest. Now, recent research in forest ecology turns that theory on its head, because actually the species which are surviving best in the forest are the ones which are collaborating best, are the ones which have co-evolved with other species to develop resilience, to develop networks, partnerships, which give them strength when the going gets tough. You may have heard of a phrase called the World Wide Web, the Wood Wide Web. The Wood Wide Web is about the way in which these trees connect to each other under the ground. They look after each other when the going is tough. And in some cases, in the case of pines in Scotland, the granny pines, the old trees, will transfer carbon when they are young and when they're growing to their young. But when they get old, the transfer happens in reverse. The young trees look after the older trees and supply them with carbon as they get old. Now, each individual plant is only as strong, and in fact lives longer, in a vibrant forest where it is supported by a network. Does that sound familiar? From your own communities, from your own towns? These are the kinds of relationships, these are the kinds of patterns and systems that we need to build. So, as well as climate literacy, social and political literacy is at the heart of what we teach. Because, for better or worse, our leaders have failed us. Who around us here, who in this room, sees a government that is acting at the speed and the scale that's required, that we all know is required? I don't see any hands, but... Exactly. I don't either. So what this means is it's up to us, it's up to local, municipal, individual and community groups and networks to build resilience, because the storms that you've had in Austria, that we are having this week in Wales, that the Americans have had over the last few weeks, are nothing compared to the ones which are coming. And there is nothing we're going to be able to do to stop that. We might be able to slow it down, we might be able to reduce the intensity of some of those future storms, but be very clear, the Earth is not getting colder, it's only getting hotter, and there's nothing we can do to reverse that. We can slow it, getting hotter, but we can't reverse where we are now. So that's why thinking like a forest is so important. Building the networks, building the mycelium, if you like, amongst ourselves, both in our communities, but more broadly, you know, whether welcome to Wales, or, you know, wherever you are across borders. So that community, that resilience resides in that community. And the last point I'd like to make is that the revolution has to be fun. When the students are coming to us, they're choosing to come to the middle of nowhere, to a cold, wet mountain in a tiny village with 3 pubs, with no cinema, with no lattes and fancy shops. But they love it because we are imagining our own fun. We are imagining new ways of doing things. We are challenging ourselves not to eat plastic, to drink plastic, to wear plastic, to wash plastic away through our washing machines. We're challenging ourselves to lower our emissions, to do things differently, to reimagine systems within our village, within our local area, and indeed at the national level as well. And we're having a lot of fun doing it. So my last plea is, whatever you're doing, try and make sure it's more fun than the other guys. Thank you very much.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Ben RAWLENCE. Und wir plaudern jetzt ein bisschen über das Gesagte.
And now we'll discuss what was said with Ben himself, but also with some reinforcements. Artist and activist Isa Klee.
Oder, achso, oder nimmst du den Sessel? Gut.
Okay, just bring up your chair, that's good. and a cordial welcome, Isa, to our group. You yourself were part of the exhibition Into the Woods that was organized in the Kunsthaus in Vienna, the art center. So artists dealt with our forests. Of course, you would come up with something like Back to the Roots. You yourself got into the forest with people in order to collect stuff. So why did you do that? And do we need to see nature with our own eyes and experience it in order to be able to stand up for nature? Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and hi. In the framework of the exhibition, the plan was to come up with an archive of seeds, a seed bank, and we wanted to make sure that traditional plant species that are often already threatened, well, can be saved that way. And it was about showing up the loss of habitat in cities, and of course it makes sense to go to these places directly on site to create a first-hand awareness about how important these places are and how important it is to learn about these plants and species. And of course there's an increasing amount of urbanization. People move to urban areas increasingly, so it's about how do you bring nature back to these cities, or how do you preserve it. And this is why we wanted to come up with this archive of seeds from riparian forests, and to do this together with people. So if you talk about this issue, whether it's through a training, a school, or from the artistic perspective, or as an activist, should it be accessible, where everybody can join and going collect stuff in woods? Yes, I think that we're seeing a trend reversal in research. This motto of going back to the roots and everybody can contribute, I think this is really true. Also in the area of research, there's more and more citizen science. So it is important for many people to become engaged in nature conservation, where there isn't really a lot of money to be had, so these projects are not fully financed. It's important to ensure that the general public is involved and citizens are involved, and that creates an awareness and forms a good basis for nature conservation and protection of species, biodiversity, and also the climate disaster. And I believe that this is a great opportunity to go beyond professional borders and to collaborate with other industries and to involve as many people as possible. And I have to say that it's not a substitute for sufficient funding coming from the public authorities and our society. It should be on the political agenda, of course. What were the reactions of people who were there? Any experiences that they shared with you? Well, I think for many people it is quite pleasant to spend time in nature. So Ben also referred to that, learning together and having fun doing it. That's really important. I see that too. So during the exhibition, but also the Eco Campus Vienna, where at the campus of University of Vienna we also have we protect species, and on 6 hectares of land we involve the general public, and we become active, and together we have fun doing that. So people feel at ease, and maybe some parents will also want to chime in here. So the 5 minutes that children have out in nature, and if you're fortunate enough to have 5 minutes in a forest, well, the forest moderates our mood. And then to come back to the forests in Wales, if we look at the timeline that we need to respect in order to move things in a sustainable way, well, can we afford to wait for people to be properly trained and to know about all the facts, or do we need to do these things contemporaneously?
I don't think there is any particular limit or target. I think this is a moving target all the time, and the more we do now, as the President said, the less we'll need to spend later. But it's already very late, and it's already too late to, as I said, to go backwards. You know, we are at 1.6 degrees. We will only go up from here, and there are incredible impacts which are locked in from here onwards. So I don't think it's a question of moving in back to some kind of sustainable past that we might have once had. It's a question of damage limitation from here on out.
And adaptation.
And adaptation. And that is about justice. That's about looking after people, making sure everyone has enough food, shelter, water. You know, that's the level of planning that which we should be at.
Würdest du sagen, das ist das Entscheidende?
Would you say that's the decisive skill that we need to convey to people, or is there anything else that is the core? This is what people need to understand to become active themselves.
I think there's a fundamental failure on the part of government to communicate the seriousness of the situation and the processes which are involved. So the thing that the sort of key lever in terms of social tipping points, which I would look at, is Article 12 of the Paris Treaty, which every European country has ratified, which has a duty to educate the population on the subject of climate change as a key element of realizing the treaty. That's the key language in the UN document, that if you don't do education, you won't achieve the Paris Treaty. Now, we won't achieve the Paris Treaty because we're already beyond it, but we will achieve a lot more if governments step up and do public education on the scale that they did with COVID. In my country, we spent £1 billion on public education on COVID. How much have we spent on climate education? In terms of TV adverts and radio adverts and things like that. So that's the key point, I think. And then municipal authorities, local government and so on can have conversations about adaptation. They can allocate resources when the public is informed about what's at stake.
Ich erlebe das in Österreich auch immer, wenn
I'm seeing this time and again in Austria. If you face people with facts and try to convey these facts to people, it is often difficult because people are saying, well, you're just painting a disastrous scenario, you're too negative. But if you're an activist or if you're an artist, have you found a middle ground, a happy medium, or is this how you can reach people best? Based on what's closest to the facts? I think it's a difficult tightrope act. There's an author, an Austrian author, who said that, well, I think we can tell people the truth. And the question is how we can keep on living on this damaged planet. Ben already talked about this question of culture. And I think when it comes to mediating this, communicating this, we need a lot of interpersonal communication. This is sometimes not even based on words, but simply gestures. I work with that a lot, gestures. And I think this is really urgent. I don't have an answer to your question, of course, because I don't always know what had an impact on people and what didn't. But I believe that in my case, I noticed that it is really incredibly urgent, also the dying off of insects. And this gave me a kind of empowerment, because I saw that it's so dramatic, nobody takes it seriously enough, so, okay, I need to do something myself. And there's always these gaps in systems where you see that there's nobody who's in charge of that, there's no institution in charge of that, so maybe we need to fill this gap ourselves, and this is why I started my work. And this is the role that I've now adopted. This is what I do now, and I'm helping to promote biodiversity and other species. And I think the self-empowerment is important, and we need to take the situation seriously enough to show that everyone is needed to help build a common future. This is really bitter, but I'll stick with you. You said that it's okay to state the truth. Well, my timer says we don't have any time for this panel discussion anymore, so if Isa is here, you can always discuss that with her. So thank you very much to Isa Klee. Thank you very much. It gives me sleepless nights. It keeps me awake at night. I think about it day and night. I pray that we get some rain. My name is Kabale. I'm 36 years old. I'm married. I have 6 children. I live in the north of Kenya. The people there are herdsmen. Even as a child, I look after the animals. The goal is to fill the animals' bellies with enough grass. We had 200 cows and 130 goats. So I take the goats to places where they can eat grass. I clean them. When it's hot, I take them to the watering hole. I keep changing the place so that they get enough to eat. When I hugged the animals, it felt good. There are animals that see you coming from afar, they come to you, and they rub against you. Most people love their animals. And the animal loves the person who follows it every day. I also help my goats give birth to their young ones, their kids. I massage them. I help with the pushing very slowly. Immediately after the birth, I carry the baby goat and wash it. Well, you become attached to this young goat. If you breed cows properly, they will multiply. When I got married, I wore traditional clothing. My husband was handsome and strong. I had a good figure and a very beautiful face. Then we were left without rain. The ground became dusty, trees dried up. There was no grass to eat for the animals. This drought would be different. The temperature became so high we couldn't even walk around outside. When the first animal died, we thought at first it had been bitten by a snake. One cow had lost a lot of weight. Some could hardly walk, they could hardly get up, they stretched out their legs. Others fell to the ground sideways. Some made sounds as a sign of imminent death. After 7 days, we lost the next cow. I was horrified. I went to other places looking for grass. To reach my destination, I once walked for 13 hours. I tried to fatten up the animals. I gave them injections. If they didn't graze independently, I fed them. When an animal is hungry, it cannot be saved. We were very disappointed. There's nothing we could do. One person who committed suicide had lost 200 cows. When we were young, we could dig our own wells. Now, every other day, I will walk for hours trying to find water. We have no water. The number of animals kept going down. that was the time when our family was haunted by hunger. Now, human lives are at risk. I pray that we get some rain. Right now, we have 4 cows. No goats. My husband is 7 years older than me, and now he looks younger than I do. When I show a picture of myself from 5 years ago, then people say, "That's not me." Thank you, Masengu Kanyinda and Schöfmann for the musical accompaniment. Thank you very much. So what we saw was a climate monologue, one of several climate monologues, and the head behind this project is Michael Ruf, a director, and he's here as well today. So a cordial welcome. Hello, Michael. Michael, tell us more about this. What is the idea behind this project of the climate monologues? Well, the idea behind is to show up the urgency of the climate crisis. For this purpose, I conducted a lot of detailed interviews with people from the global south. Now, if we were to show the climate monologue full length, it's 4 stories from Kenya that we just heard, but also Bangladesh, Pakistan, and 1 story from the global north, from California. So I conducted very long interviews. I just shortened them, brought them into a dramaturgic shape, but nothing was invented. Also, the language used was kept. So this is really verbatim theater. And now another short comment. There's now a huge network of actors, singers, musicians, so it's always regional artists who are presenting these climate monologues. So if you are active in the climate movement yourself, and if you want these climate monologues to be performed in your city or at your place of work, with this large network of artists, we can cover that together. Well, today was 2 artists from Vienna who did that. So, in other words, by working with local artists, it is very easy to perform such a theater piece. We can perform it anywhere, anytime. So thank you for allowing us to see this today. And those of you who think that this is something for me, well, remember this beautiful face. He will be around during the networking, so don't be shy. Talk to him and bring the climate monologues to your own neighborhood. Thank you. Michael Ruf. Actually, it doesn't matter what statistics you quote. In the media, well, you can be sure that the Scandinavian countries are always among the best. Well, they know something that we apparently don't know. So I think you can safely say that. But whether this is really the case, well, we'll learn more about this now. LINA BURNELIUS is an expert in climate and land use issues, and she works as an international coordinator for the NGO Protect the Forest Sweden. With her interdisciplinary knowledge, she works for sustainable development from the local to the global level. Her main focus is on the protection, restoration, and climate-friendly management of forests. She believes in the right of future generations to a habitable and healthy planet, and the right of indigenous peoples to reject interference on their land. For her, ecological forestry means respecting planetary boundaries when meeting societal needs. BURNELIUS wants to hold politicians accountable for implementing international agreements and thus ensure a smooth transition to an ecological forestry. Neon Green Network presents LINA BURNELIUS.
Thank you for having me. On one hand, we are meeting in Vienna today, but on the other hand, we are meeting on this one-of-a-kind floating rock out in space. This is our only house. There is no planet B. We need to start to take action. We are the ones who need to enable a plan B. Business as usual is clearly not working. We urgently need to stop overshooting, exceeding this planet's boundaries. And we urgently need to stop leaving people behind in shortfall. This is not safe. This is not fair. Along our prevailing, very unfair business-as-usual pathway, we, some more than others, have put way too much greenhouse gas emissions up in the atmosphere, and we have safeguarded far too little biodiversity down here on Earth. And as a result, we are speeding towards tipping points, physiological tipping points beyond human control. Domino effects that equal unimaginable amount of even more shortfall. More animals and people will starve, flee, die, and suffer. We are talking about fires, floods, droughts, and crop failures on scales that words to describe them do not even exist yet. I want you to know that every fraction of a degree matter. Every ecosystem saved matter. Every tipping point mitigated matter. Addressing this double trouble, it's about justice. It is about animal rights, it is about human rights, and it's about safety. It all boils down to time. What is the safe thing to do in time? Imagine that you've been diagnosed with cancer and you meet your doctor. He tells it like it is. This is really troublesome. This is a crisis. We do not have cancer fully figured out, but the scientific evidence is clear. It all boils down to time. We have a critical window of opportunity in which we need to act. We need to do this before you reach metastatic state. There's a few do's and don'ts. We need to put you on chemo and radiation and other type of treatments. It will be hurtful. There's a few don'ts. You need to change the way you move around. You need to change what you're eating. You cannot continue to feed this cancer. It will be inconvenient. Imagine your surprise and your relief when the Swedish government swoops in, holding hand with a Swedish company, I might add. And they tell you, this sounds stressful, inconvenient. No need to worry. We have this new technology. It's green, it's fair, it's sustainable, it's certified. Actually, IKEA made it. So you can stay at home. No need to worry. It's an easy pill to swallow. It is first, much later, when you need a fine print of this pill, that you will learn that you will be cancer-free first when you are 110 years old. Far too little, far too late. They did what they always do best. They swoop in, they greenwash you, and they take out the aspect of time. In this metaphor, I just want to be super clear. Moving forward, during my talk, I want you to know that in this metaphor, the one who was diagnosed with cancer was your child. We have, in other words, a very, very unfair and very, very urgent crisis at hand. And we do not have this fully figured out, but the scientific evidence is clear. It all boils down to time. We have a critical window of opportunity in which we need to act. There's a few do's and don'ts. And in sake of time, I'm only going to name a few. But we do need to phase out fossil fuels, some faster than others. We need to restore and protect 30% of the ocean. We need to decrease our energy demand. We need to bring back season to the food store. We need to get rid of fashion seasons in clothing and furniture stores. We need to fundamentally redefine our relationship to land use, to agriculture, and to forests. Forests. I'm going to zoom in and talk about forests' role in this today. You've heard this story before. How big, multi-international mega companies are expanding into this last remaining flourishing, withholding a bedrock of life, astonishing, beautiful forest ecosystems. They silence and threaten and push away indigenous peoples. They are wiping away entire ecosystems. They are backed by the government so they can tear out protection, and then they expand even further on the ground, puncturing the planet's lungs, emptying the carbon storage, wipe away biodiversity and species, all in order to plant monocultures, one crop of one kind in perfect harvest line, all in order to feed their suppliers this climate bomb of an industry that is producing foremost climate-damaging end products for consumers, foremost in the global north. I don't know how many of you who now thought of the Amazon, but that was the description of my home country, Sweden. The Swedish forestry model is famous for every tree we log, we plant 2 new ones. That specific choice, that specific model, that is the factor with the strongest negative impact on biodiversity. No other Swedish industry poses a greater threat to the survival of species and biodiversity than the Swedish forest industry. The same industry that is also famous for its fossil-free solutions are alone emitting more CO2 than all of Sweden's other terrestrial emission sources are emitting combined. No other Swedish industry has this big carbon footprint. So if you only take away one sentence from my talk here today, it is when it comes to forestry, do not listen to Sweden. But I know it's hard, because they are indeed swooping in everywhere. Their greenwashing is everywhere. They're holding hands with the government everywhere. And that's their main tactic. Holding hands, corruption, and greenwashing. One tactic that they did not come up with on their own, I might add. They just simply stole the fossil fuel and the tobacco company's playbook, and they use it against us. Create some doubt. Cherry-pick facts. Shift the baseline. Delay, delay, delay. Greenwash. Hijack the narrative. Rewrite key definitions in laws. Delay, delay, delay. Silence, threaten, scale up, divide and conquer, start culture wars, delay, delay, delay. So naturally, a big part of my job is to do all in my power to force this industry into truly sustainable forestry. And I need to add the word truly before sustainable, because sustainable is one of those words which they have hijacked and just filled with greenwashing. But truly, again, sustainable forestry is as simple as following 3 simple rules. Where can we have forestry? How, with what method should we use on land that can be logged? And what should we produce? Because society needs both forestry and products from forests. If you start to follow these simple 3 rules, you will create a win, 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 win for society. You will safeguard carbon stocks. You will have truly functioning carbon sinks. You will safeguard biodiversity. You will safeguard local jobs, clean water, clean air, the ability to learn, mushrooms, berries, recreation, and culture. In a saved forest, in a restored forest, and in a forest where we have ecosystem-based, truly sustainable forestry, all of us can live and thrive and survive. Species can survive, and many can live off the land. You can use the land without abusing the land. Sorry, I need a little bit of water. Now I just outlined briefly what we are standing for and what this truly sustainable forestry means, so that you know what we stand for when we stand up against this industry, because that's what we do. And this is by no means a woman show. It feels really weird to be here alone, given the fact that we are a fast-growing grassroots movement for justice. We are doing all in our power to put a spotlight on Sweden's greenwashed, neo-colonial, globally famous, FSC-certified sustainable forestry model. The same model that systematically break the same 3 rules. They go where they shouldn't go. We all know old-growth forest is a no-go zone. They go there every day. 99 out of 100 times they carry out the most climate and biodiversity harmful tree replanting method. And lastly, and I know it's shocking, but the majority of this precious biomass that they do take out of these ecosystems are burned as energy, as single-use paper, as packaging, and as fuels. Fully informed, they are systematically breaking these rules, and they are moving enormous amount of carbon out of the stock where it belongs into the atmosphere, when it makes our planet even more unsafe and unfair. Sweden isn't the leader on sustainable forestry. We are the leader, though, on greenwashing unsustainable forestry. Now I'm going to zoom in on their favorite greenwashing. So this is something that I hope that you will remember. Due to their model, we are foremost losing forests, not trees. Again, this is an ever-expanding industry on the ground, and forests are not renewable. Forest is an ecosystem that we can protect and restore, but man can only replant trees. Many replanted trees does not form a forest, it forms the opposite. IKEA isn't forest positive. Europe isn't forest positive. We don't have more forests than ever, we have more trees than ever. That is not the same thing. Think of it like this: a soy plantation, not a rainforest. A tulip field, not a meadow. A spruce plantation, not a forest. These plantations are, however, climate bombs. please note that even if they plant many, many, many trees that grows really, really, really fast, the emissions that were created from their logging practices and from their products are so big that it takes many decades for these biodiversity harmful tree plantations to even begin to take back and start to paying back this enormous carbon debt. Time that we do not have. But the general public still doesn't know this, because this industry has swooped in on enough arenas and they have successfully taken out the aspects of time. The urgency is lost. Me, my friends and my allies, we look like fools. Alarmist even. And that is what they want. That creates yet another gap, and they can swoop in once again, and business as usual can cash in on yet another quarterly report, and that is the bottom line, told up front. Every day, they are putting their profit over everyone and everything they share this house with. Behind me is a document that proves what I am saying. It's not just my words. This is a document written by the forest industry themselves, and I'm going to read a few words out loud. We are concerned over the short time frames for emission reductions that has been established under the climate regime. If the shorter timeframes were imposed on the forestry sector, these can lead to decisions to preserve carbon stocks in the short term. They know. They know. And if you are still not convinced, I'm also going to read from the last part of this document. Again, this is their own words. A strategic long-term initiative for communicating widely and influencing policy will be required. A key arena is the EU policy processes. And they have been busy. Not only is this industry producing climate-damaging, short-life products out of irreplaceable, non-renewable forest ecosystem, they are defending this climate scam of a model on the European arena. They followed their to-do list, and they were successful. Long story short, they watered down, and they blocked, and they delayed everything related to forest, packaging, energy, etc. And as a result, all of these policies are now just a shell game. They are moving around carbon on paper, and they are increasing the carbon emissions in reality. Society is best described as a bus traveling towards a cliff, and all these so-called climate targets and initiatives and COPs and laws and directives, they are just as insufficient as hitting the brake first when the bus is midair. Because Swedish and Nordic companies and Nordic governments and all their allies, they are so good at what they're doing. They have so many powerful players, so wrapped around their greenwashed fingers that we often put them in the driving seat. The only way to describe what is going on through the northern part of Sweden is to call it for what it is. This is the epicentrum for false climate solutions. Sápmi, home of the indigenous people, is now sacrificed for their green transition. Spoiler alert, the green fuels, the green paper, the green steel, the green mines, the green energy, it's not that green. It's red. Bloody red. In its literal form. Every day, they are carrying out human rights violations. I'm going to zoom in on what they are doing to the forest land, protected by all these climate goals and this Green New Deal and all the other directives. After only 60 years, companies that are 60 years young in ecosystems that stood tall since time immortal. After only 60 years of FSC certified sustainable forestry model, as much as 71% of the lichen-rich forests that are crucial for the survival of the reindeer and thus the whole indigenous Sami culture are already disappeared. 71% of the land that can feed the reindeer have already disappeared. The Sami communities are sounding the alarm. And now I'm going to read a quote from a Sami friend of mine. The reindeer are starving. We are slowly dying. And by we, I mean all of us. You as well. The reindeer have survived here in this harsh Arctic climate since time immortal. Not even the reindeer can survive any longer. You should all be alarmed. But this industry, they just continue. They pick up their playbook once again and then they start yet another culture war. They scale up their divide and conquer, or with the aim to silence science-based demands, campaigns, and foremost, silence indigenous people's knowledge. Knowledge that could be easily translated into one very, very telling statistics. 80% of the biodiversity left here on our only house can be found in territories where indigenous people have some sort of stewardship or say. So next time, because there will be a next time, someone has a green idea and someone managed to create a little doubt, always side with the indigenous peoples and not with extractivists. Protect our protectors. Especially now when I'm going to repeat one of the first sentences of my talk, because we have put way too much greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere and we have safeguarded far too little biodiversity down here on Earth. In order to navigate ourselves as safely as possible during this double trouble, we need to safeguard more forests. There's no way around it. There has to be a joint understanding that old-growth forest is a no-go zone. Old-growth forests still have the biodiversity intact. If they are allowed to remain, they also have the carbon stock intact. And it has not been it has not been replaced by a false planted sink. And we do not want forestry to cease to exist. As I told you, we want them to follow the 3 rules. Where, how, what? They, on the other hand, are fighting tooth and nail. Oh my God, tooth and nail to get away with expansion, monoculture, and burning. How do you stop someone who has their mind set on harmful expansion? You stand in their way. And when they use their playbook against you, you stand your ground. That is how every peaceful civil society movement have ever worked in the past. Peaceful protesting and telling the truth. We are right, they are wrong. The carbon belongs in the ground, so we stand our ground. Because the house is on fire. We can't burn ourselves out of this heating crisis. We cannot continue to burn fossil fuels, but we cannot listen to the forest industry and simply make a fuel switch from fossil fuels to biofuels. We cannot simply make a switch from single-use plastic to single-use paper. We need to break free from short-lived from throwaway, from single use, from burning. Our house is on fire, and not only did the arsonist silent the smoke alarm, they left their kid inside, and then they fed their babysitter sleeping pills and go back to sleep greenwashing lullabies. Green, certified, sustainable, replanted, compensated. Our house is still on fire, so we need to be the smoking alarm, the fire alarm. They can call me what they want, an alarmist even. We also need you. Support your local justice group. Take part in any type of restoration project. Join the youth climate marches. And when you are ready, advocate, speak up, write open letters, sign open letters, set up petition, reach out to traditional media, especially local media. Share on social media, join workshops, join protests in the street or in the forest or whatever. Find a topic that's close to your heart and show up. I know it can be scary to start to take action. We all know what we are up against. But I can tell you something personal and magnificent. You have very, very little to fear. When you start taking action, the one you are becoming will catch you, as will we. Join the justice movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nina BURNELIUS. I think there's a lot that we need to talk about, and we'll discuss this now together with LINA and also with the resource campaigner of Global 2000, Anna Leitner. Hello, Anna. Please do get comfortable. We just heard some things about situations where the markets are establishing their own rules. But you at Global 2000, well, you know about the rules. We know the Supply Chain Act of the EU, the Corporate Due Diligence Act. So now we have a set of rules and everything's fine and dandy, right? Well, that would be great. And we would all see our fears allayed after Lina's speech. So we'd be very, we would like it if we heard that a lot has happened and there's been progress at a political level, the Green Deal and all that, and we are moving in the right direction. Especially the International Energy Agency has published the latest figures, so the figures were revised upward. There's so much PV growth. We have the green bioeconomy next week. I will attend a meeting where I'll hear more about the green bioeconomy in Austria. But unfortunately, we can't rest in peace because rather than doing the laws that are needed, laws are being made that are possible. Laws that are possible under the influence of strong lobbies and also influenced by underlying assumptions that we have in our societies and our economies, that we need to grow. And everything that we currently have by way of industry and exploiting resources, everything that could be restricted is considered to be a risk. So as soon as things get serious, we need to row back in terms of the rules and politics, because the Swedish national economy depends on the Swedish companies to grow, because pension systems and social welfare systems are coupled to that. The Austrian national economy is also coupled with extractive industries, mining industries. Like in most countries worldwide, we are coupled to growth. And this is why we are getting cold feet when these laws might actually have an impact. And the Supply Chain Act has been passed with a lot of delay, to quote LINA. So in the coming years, if it's not blocked again, like the deforestation, regulation that will be postponed. So if it's going to come, it'll come maybe in 2027 for the really big companies, and maybe in 28 and 29 for other companies. But we know that we need to stop destroying our climate and our environment today. We need to stop human rights violations globally now, not only in the global south, but also in Europe. And yeah, I can only subscribe to the fact that this is a huge power we're facing, so we have to fight them together. Now, if we participate in the political processes as an NGO, you may often hear that this will destroy the economy and jobs will be lost, there will be poverty, and the social welfare systems can't be funded anymore. So it's a whole rat tail. We've heard where the journey shouldn't be headed, but where should the economy be headed? Well, there's so many things we are renouncing currently. We are renouncing freedom to move. That will be good for our bodies and our environment. We renounce well-insulated homes without any draft. We renounce autocratic regimes, and we are renouncing all of these things consciously because the decisions we're taking is a few people enrich themselves. Just look at the inequality statistics when it comes to the distribution of wealth. So where the economy needs to be going is, well, it's becoming increasingly clear. It's not just one solution, but there's lots of solutions. We need more decentralization, more feminism, and there's a lot of topics that are currently being discussed, and this is a positive note. We are talking more about these things than 10 years ago, because in recent years it has become clear that the focus on protecting the climate is being exploited by industries telling us this technology is good enough. Lina, listening to you, it became aware that this is a huge problem we're facing. This is a big threat. On the other hand, I also thought, wow, this woman who's standing here, she does what she does really well with a lot of passion, and I can lean back because she can do such a much better job than I can. And I think that's not the reaction you would like to see from people like me. So what do you expect from us? What do activists need from people who have less courage than you do?
Oh, I think it's very important to underline that not only is everyone welcome, everyone is needed. The best ideas are yet to be found, and if you want to have an inclusive, fair society, you need to start to make those connections, and you need to bottom up have this resistance movement, similar to how a resilient, functioning forest are working. The resilient resistance movement has to be the same. You need all types of species in all type of age classes, and the same is the resistance movement. We are stronger when we are biodiverse in nature, and we are stronger when we are diverse, when we make this much needed resistance that we do need. And then I think it's important for people to know that you don't have to know anything. You don't have to have a certain skill set. You just need to show up.
Das heißt,
so the first step leaving this room could be to link up with an NGO or some activists and get started. You can do that in Sweden, here in Austria. Well, you can join an Austrian NGO. Looking at the Austrian NGO market is a stupid word, but anyway, if you take a look at the Austrian NGOs, what are the best contact places? Where do you go? Well, directly from the EARTHtalks, you can maybe go to a networking in the info booth of Global 2000. Well, quite honestly, we are very privileged because we live in a society where the civil society is still possible, as long as far-right governments are not going to make this any harder. And this can take different forms and shapes. One can be that you join Global 2000, and there's so many petitions, so many possibilities, like Lina said, to help with rewilding or renaturalization projects. There's a lot of social organizations, human rights organizations, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of the entire landscape, the entire scene. We need people, we need support from people who are talking about what we do, who are participating, who are sharing, whom we can bring along for the next meeting. Only together are we strong, stronger than those who want to keep on postponing and destroying. Well, scene is a much nicer word than market, yes, quite clearly. So thank you very much for granting us those insights. Thank you also for analyzing. From the boreal forests, we'll now move on to tropical forests, and we'll bring a man onto the stage who has accompanied a woman with his camera, and some of you may know her. In 2022, she was a spokesperson here, speaker here at the EARTHtalks, and we saw her in the introductory video, Chumashipaya. She is the leader of an indigenous tribe in the Brazilian rainforest, and this is where she's fighting together with her indigenous society against illegal gold mines. And there's a documentary on that, and we'll talk to the director, Richard Ladkani. Welcome. Welcome. So we are seeing a very impressive photograph. What is the most important message of this film that we will be able to see, this documentary? I think that it is well worth fighting for. And I think there's also hope. We accompanied Juma for 5 years. It was a very interesting journey because it all started during the regime of Jair Bolsonaro, who back then exhorted people to destroy the rainforest, and he motivated people to go there, to burn down the forest and to get out whatever they can. And Juma, back then, was an activist who really worked on the front line until the time when I met her She had survived 6 assassination attempts. A short time before I met her, she was poisoned, and she was in the intensive care unit, being artificially ventilated. And that was a long time before COVID. And the doctors actually didn't give her a chance anymore because 80% of her organs were no longer working. So she was faced with multiple organ failure, and she was about to die, but then she decided to come back and to pursue her journey as a warrior. And if she were to die, she wants to die fighting and not in a bed. And this is when I met her, and then we started shooting the documentary. That was a short time before the pandemic. Then came the pandemic, but the fight went on. And there was one scene that I would like to show you, a 40-second video clip that explained more or less what kind of a woman that is, who never gives up and is fighting for her people. And maybe we can take a short look at the video clip, because I think it shows what kind of a woman this is. Well, before that, for all those who are following this on the screen, due to legal reasons, we cannot show this in the stream, but stay with us. After 40 seconds, we'll be back. So. So this shows the moment when they were shot at by the Bolsonaro government. And they were chased away like wild animals. And what's remarkable is that Chuma was the last one standing. Everybody had run away, and she was looking after this man who had been shot at. And it was remarkable because she was the leader who stayed behind. And what's also great is that in the course of the shooting, which went until 2024, there was a regime change. Lula came to power, and Bolsonaro was, voted out of office. And it is well worth fighting, as we can see, because Lula back then gave the indigenous people power. He made them a promise, and he stuck to it by setting up the first ministry for indigenous peoples. The first one they ever had, by the way, and Chumashi Baya became the Secretary of Indigenous Rights, and she thus became the second most important woman in this ministry. And you could tell how her fight that had started when she was 14 had finally paid off, and all of a sudden she reached a position where she really could make changes. We took this up in the video, in the documentary, and we were there when this transformation happened, and where the indigenous people got the opportunity for the first time to do something and to make an impact in the Amazon region. And what's also remarkable was that during the shooting she had fallen in love with a man, and she went on to marry him, and he's Hugo Loss, and he was promoted under Lula to become the head of this special environmental unit, IBAMA. And IBAMA is quite unique because it is a special force, like Delta Force or like Cobra here, but they are fighting for the environment. And under Bolsonaro, this organization was thinned out and kept small, and Lula gave him more power. And he said, you should go out there and stop illegal logging. And what was interesting was the focus of this group, and that was remarkable. We really learned a lot. The focus was on illegal gold mines in Brazil, in the Amazon region. And as far as I understood, and what I learned was that these gold mines are at the root of all evil. They're like a cancer, a tumor that pops up everywhere in the Amazon. There are thousands of these illegal gold mines, and they are at the beginning of the illegal logging. Because the illegals go into the Amazon region, they look for gold, and then they bring infrastructure there, they chop down some smaller areas to get the gold out of the ground, they get it out of the soil, they mix it with water, and they try to use poisonous heavy metals, and they use quicksilver. They weaken the entire ecosystem, and then they bring in excavators, giant excavators, who are digging up the soil, and then they build the first streets. And with these streets, then the trucks come in that start cutting down the trees, and IBAMA is fighting the mineros, these gold mines, the illegal ones. And I brought you a video clip. Maybe you can turn up the volume. It wasn't loud enough, so that we can show what.
Hello.
So I had the opportunity during 6 months to accompany the special force unit in the jungle to get to the root of all evil. This is what Juma had been fighting against, and we were there when IBAMA, the special force, and that was Hugo, her man, her husband, when he fought these illegal gold miners. It was really interesting. How is it for Juma herself when this documentary will come out? Leo DiCaprio has produced it, so there will be a lot of media echo. So what will be the consequences for her? Well, it is extremely dangerous for the entire family, and that is a sacrifice she is making, because this documentary will make her world famous. The producer is Leo DiCaprio, and actually this is the first time in the past 20 years that he has produced a film himself, and it will be dangerous for Juma to become famous with this documentary. But of course, fame can also protect you, because the more famous you are, well, the obstacle of killing her will be higher, because this would create an even bigger upheaval. So there's also a major security plan that our investors came up with. So over 2 years, we built up a system with bodyguards, safe houses, and everything that's out there. Cameras, everything to make sure that we can protect her to the best of our ability. But she wanted to make this sacrifice, just like Hugo did, because he said, that's why we're here. We're not doing it for us, we're doing it for our people. We have to fight. We need to make this generally known. There's no other choice. And if it means that there will be a 7th or an 8th assassination attempt, well, I'm ready to fight for it and to run this risk. This is a really impressive story for the likes of us. When can we see this documentary? Well, in Austria, it will be coming out in summer, autumn of next year. The global premiere will be at the beginning of next year. There will be a festival, maybe at the Sundance or Cannes or Bellen, at one of these festivals. So next year the documentary will come out. I can't tell you what the name is of the documentary. There will be a press release in 1 month's time, but I think we're going to publish it in due time. It sounds a bit excessive, but I think it is not quite unrealistic. If you look at the Oscars, the Academy Awards, well, maybe it will be also among the winners there. I'd like to wish you a lot of luck with that, Richard Ladkani, and all the best for the final sprint with the film and, yeah, for the publication of it. Richard Ladkani. We have now heard about the forests in Wales, in Sweden, in Brazil, and other continents. Now let's take a look at the forests of Romania. So there are two people who will take us there. Well, we'll talk about the companion of this man. Her name is Silva, and she follows she follows her master wherever he is, and if they ever separated, then she will go on a hunger strike. So she's a little activist in her own right, this little dog. Now, what her master does, we'll see. Well, Gabriel PAUN is a conservationist and animal rights activist. He studied natural sciences, is a founder of the Romanian NGO Agent Green and the EU Director of Animals International. His work focuses on the conservation of the last primary and primeval forests and the protection of Romanian national parks. Gabriel PAUN is waging more than 400 lawsuits for illegal logging. His lawsuits triggered a number of infringement procedures by the EU Commission against Romania. His long-running campaign against the global corporation IKEA exposes the company's greenwashing in terms of forestry. Gabriel PAUN was awarded the Euro Nature Prize in 2016, and in 2023 he was included in Politico's Green 28 list. He has survived several assassination attempts and was subsequently included in the Global Witness database and the Frontline Defenders list of the world's most endangered activists. Neon Green Network presents Gabriel PAUN.
Much. Good evening. I feel a bit broken and disturbed about everything I have heard and seen. To be honest, I thought I have seen a lot in my life, everywhere I have been for investigations, but I didn't expect this tonight. I got a headache, to be honest, over the things I have heard and seen, and that's not easy to handle. And it's also, I'm very thankful to Richard and to LINA and to Ben for having said all the things they have said, and I can only say I concur everything that you have said. Thank you so much. And thank you, Angie, for organizing this wonderful event, and the presidency for being part of it. It's a role model for the whole world. We said we're going to talk about back to the roots tonight. For me, back to the roots is also talking about sustainability and planetary health. Sustainability is something I remember they were teaching me at the end of the last century when I was studying nature sciences at the university, and they were defining it something like when we people find the cutting edge and the balance between economical growth, social well-being, and nature, whatever. I can only say we failed to achieve that. I don't think there is a proper definition of sustainability, while planetary health could have one, but I'm going to go a bit later deeper into that. What I learned also at the end of the last century in the university was that scientists were making forecasts about what is happening today, what's going to happen by 2030, 2050, end of last century, but I would stay within our lifespan. And reading again for the past few days about those scenarios, I can see that today we have actually surpassed all those. I mean, the worst case scenario, we're over it. And I'm concerned. I can see our planet showing symptoms of reduced resilience and high stress. I can see for the past 50 years since IKEA exists, for example, but are not the solely, let's say, guilty entity about this, but they are part of this. 70% of our wildlife population is gone, only in 50 years, just to put numbers to everything that has been said before. And that's a very first and concerning sign of extinction, an extinction which is unfolding as we speak, as we sit here. And we have failed to see for the past 50 years that we live on debts to the planet. I mean, we passed the overshot 50 years ago, and every year we consume more than the planet can regenerate. There is so little wildlife left that if we would have to measure, we can say there's already 2 times more plastic on our planet than wildlife, and that's not good. We have injected biomass and carbon that was produced by our planet in hundreds of millions of years in a single glimpse of time in our global economy. In short, I think we are divorced from our planet, and we have to work very hard to remarry our planet. And perhaps the biggest reason why this has happened, that we divorced, it's the whole education system. It's just my mindset. There is a lot of great guys out there like Ben trying to get people back in the nature and work with nature. There are kindergartens with kids going out, but the vast majority of education was and still is built around us, the humans, the supreme species on this planet. We are great, but we can't be supreme. And perhaps the solution here would be to rethink the education system around Earth. And we can rethink everything around our Earth. Then we can discuss about planetary health. For the moment, for the time being, if our planet Earth would have been taken to Akaha, to the hospital, I think they would put our planet to intensive care. We just don't have the tools to do that, because, I mean, if we want to build a new hospital between the Siebentebezirk and the Erstebezirk, because the people would say, hey, we don't have enough hospital, that would be the local government to decide, hey, we need this hospital, so let's build it. If we need a new, let's say, rail line between Vienna and Tyrol, then this will be the federal government to decide. If we make a night train from Vienna to London, then this will be the government of Europe, which is the European Commission. But to deal with climate change, with the nuclear Armageddon that is knocking on our door like never before, to deal with artificial intelligence and gene editing, we need the planet to have its own government. That means building bridges and working together. That's the only way to avoid a major disaster that is ahead of us. Thank you. From where we are, and I don't want to sound apocalyptical, but I think I kind of need you to worry. We need to worry together. The only way out is down, because hell is already above us. And when I'm saying that there is a way down, and we can go down in a controlled way to make sure that we will face a future less terrible than it's unfolding in front of us, by a degrowth, because I said we are on debts to the planet, which means we have to somehow degrow, because the degrowth will happen regardless if we plan it or not. It's going to be by disaster or by design. I prefer the design option, because by design we can make choices, and it's going to be less terrible than it looks right now. And I already said that we can do that by education. And there is great power in individual choices, in collective choices, and these are choices which are beyond the power of politicians or corporations, because, for example, we can choose to have less or no animals in our plate when we eat. We can choose to plan a smaller family. We can choose to travel electric. We can start asking ourselves when we buy new stuff, do we really need to buy that stuff? And if we buy that stuff, we should look at quality, that we hold on to it for as long as we can, and perhaps we pass it to a next generation. That's one thing we asked from IKEA that Lina was speaking about. Don't make single-use furniture that is gonna change like socks because they have a catalog next year. I mean, make a dining table for the family last for 1,000 years. That would be a change. So there are choices we can make, but we have to get involved, like each of us, and like not starting 1st of January, not next month, not tomorrow, like now. And like now, I would quote Lina when she said, show yourself. And I would develop that a little bit, if I may, Lina. To me, show yourself is, you don't have to be a campaigner like I am, or like Lina is, or a school teacher, like a university teacher, like Ben. It's about finding that thing that makes your heart sing, because everybody has a secret inner gift which has to be discovered and revealed. Everybody's good at something, and you know when you do that thing because your heart is singing. And it starts everything with getting involved by saying no when you have to say no. I'm not going to give examples, but you can do that at home, in your family. You can do it on the streets. You can do it at work. You can do it at elections also. It's a lot of moments when we can say no. But if you choose to be a campaigner, like I am, there are things I learned, and I'm very grateful. I see in this room a few people who have trained me 20 years ago. I see Mathias. Hello, Mathias. I see Alexander. Thank you for the best trainings anyone on this earth could get to get ready for this fight, because it's not easy to fight large corporations. And these trainings are so good that you can actually go against any corporation with the right strategy, with the right smart objectives, with an amazing myriad of tactics. And it does work. I mean, but there are things you can't learn them, because these corporations are very, very powerful. And they will stop at nothing to come and get you. But you do have a chance, and you do have a sort of a force behind you. I can't explain it. It's not a kind of Jedi Master kind of force, but perhaps it is. We can call them guardian angels. When you are genuine, your love for nature, when you are armed only with science and the truth, they will look after you. When you're not that, they won't. And I'm going to just share a few stories that it exposes a little bit what it means, and that no training can prepare you for. First story doesn't have to do anything with forest. It's a story which I was doing when I was with Greenpeace like 20 years ago. And my first great opponent was no other company than Monsanto. Monsanto, perhaps some of you heard about it. They are the one, they exist since 1902. They have designed a chemical weapon using Vietnam. They are doing pesticides, fertilizers, putting patents on seeds, and making these genetically modified organisms. And it was a very, very harsh battle. And I started fearless. But they ignored in the beginning. I insisted. Then they offered me a job. I persisted. Then what was next? I think they offer a sum of money with many, many zeros. They tried. I mean, they tried their best. Then they went with direct threats, like really dead threats, face to face. Then it was a kidnap attempt, and then a kill attempt. And then I was extracted by my fellow colleagues from Greenpeace and been taken abroad. I received more trainings, the security trainings. And they were good. But I was still not prepared for some other things I have done in my career, because I'm not, I can't separate my love for nature and animals, regardless if they are wild animals or descendants of wolves like Silva here. I've been in places where basically no one wants to go, and have seen things where you normally, when they come on your social media feed, you just skip because it's too disturbing. Like, for example, ivory trade in Africa, can hunting in Africa, fur farming in Scandinavia, foie gras in France, feather plucking of the geese and ducks for sleeping bags, jackets, and so on. You name it, all those things. Or the live export of European animals to Africa and Middle East. I've seen it all, and I thought I'm getting stronger. Every time I see something, I'm getting stronger, and I thought this kind of psychological numbing would protect me. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. And it was a day when I was in Palestine for an investigation, when the mix of suffering of humans and animals came out of me in the form of vomiting blood. It's when the moral trauma became physical trauma. It's something I was never prepared for it. I was basically hiding in it to me. I didn't know it's there, and it was very bad. It changed my whole life. And I'm saying this because I don't think that nobody's spared from that. If you choose this path, choose to have professional talks with psychologists, whatever coaches, that's very important, because in the end it might be a bit more than just vomiting blood. It can completely change your behavior. You can become a nightmare for your family, for your friends, for everybody around you. Be very careful with that if you choose that way. I'm going to stop with this, and I'm going to switch a bit to my home country, Romania, where we do have still, despite all this illegal logging, some amazing primary and old-growth forests, like the one in the very beginning, when you could see perhaps between the branches of oak trees two babies of Emma, a mother bear who I know personally. She's wild and very wild. And there were two of her 3 cubs from the last series, and they were having a siesta in a tree. That's the kind of forest we fight for, where you wouldn't know unless you see chemtrails on the sky that is year 2024 after Christ. And it was maybe 20 years ago when a very large Austrian corporation called Holzindustrie Schweighofer came to Romania, and they started to build factory after factory until they have built processing capacity which is larger than the cutting allowance. We've been talking back and forth for like 10 years, trying to talk about that sustainability I was mentioning in the beginning, about traceability, transparency. It was all bullshit. They never changed anything. So 10 years ago, I came here in Vienna, and I had a face-to-face talk with the CEO. I think Mathias was with me. I was already with AJ and Green. It was many years after I left from Greenpeace, and I have informed them basically that we're gonna switch the tactic. We're gonna go the hard way. And in short, it all started with me documenting a truck from a logging concession of 10,000 cubic meters from a virgin forest inside the most beloved national park in Romania, all the way to their sawmill. I even have a notar with me to testify that the footage is genuine. I was weighed with punches and kicks and a pepper spray, and I ended up in hospital. That was one of the life-threatening attacks I have suffered. There were some of them much worse. I have been transported to AKH in Vienna because my attackers were around the hospital, and they wanted to get the job done because their intention was to cancel me completely. But after this story, it went so bad for the company that they have to change their name. I told them it's the easy or the hard way. you can't mess up with the trainings you get at Greenpeace. You can really fight the largest corporations. And the change has started. The change has started, and they can, any moment I can actually knock on their door, and they have to open the door at the factory, otherwise we have a big problem and their clients would know. They have to show at any moment where every single tree is coming from and where it's going to. And they have a system to prove that they are no longer accepting any piece of wood from a national park. And then I was still criticizing them, and they were asking why, and say, you're too big. You have to downgrade by design, not by more disasters. And they have done that as well. The next level with them is to stay away of clear cuts and goes to forestry close to nature, or you can call it close canopy forestry, where the sun is not touching the ground. So anything else than clear cuts and keep the forest native. And this kind of fight I'm having now, and that's a campaign. I don't know if I have time, but I think there is another kind of threats that I should say that you should be aware if you choose this path. Perhaps the cyber attacks. I can't say if it was the Austrian company or another one, because I have so many opponents. But there was one day, and I'm saying this story because it involves a very beloved Austrian journalist, Florian Klenk. I don't know, Florian, if you're in this room, but I'm sure he remembers this story. One day, someone has stolen his identity, his phone number, his voice, his email, his everything, just to convince me to open an email. It wasn't Florian. It was totally someone else. It was a very sophisticated hacker. And by trusting Florian, because I think Florian is to be trusted when it comes about investigative journalism, they have extracted all my emails since 2009 until that day. They've destroyed my computer, and a lot of things happened after that. It went very, very bad. It was a time when I also discovered my whole home was wired. There were live transmission for every single room, and that's obviously someone was spending a lot of resources to know what I'm doing and to do whatever they do with that. What I'm saying here is that all my devices that were hacked were given to the secret services here in Austria, in my home country, Romania, and to United States, because they also hacked our partner organization there, and they couldn't find anything. Lesson learned: you're not safe on internet. Double and triple check whatever you open, and that's another kind of thing you don't get trained to when you join the movement and you have high-profile campaigns. And last story, but I mean, LINA said already so much about IKEA and what they're doing. I'm just saying they came to my home country, Romania, and not only to make furniture, because they've doing that since 40 years actually. They have factories, they're making furniture, but they became the largest private forest owner. They're buying land, and they're not improving forestry, they're reducing it, they're changing it. When we published the last map of primary and old-growth forest together with Mathias here in the room, I went to IKEA and the other corporations operating in Romania and asked them kindly in a gentleman agreement dinner, please stay out of this last remaining primary and old-growth forest, like 500,000 hectares, impressive. That would be like 8% of the forests. And it was the IKEA representative who stood up at a dining table, punched the table, and he said, no, that's the last forest we can cut. I just can't get that out of my mind. And so I start a new global campaign now, and I'm gonna need you. I'm gonna need groups all around the world, because fighting IKEA as a global corporation is not easy. We already launched the report, we met them, and it was a clear signal they are not gonna change. I basically told them, well, you don't practice what you preach, and what you preach is not enough, the ambition is too low, and they won't change. They only invited us to become an FSC member, which doesn't make sense because they certify clear cuts in a national park in a virgin forest, so we are at war with IKEA. And again, it's a campaign that will require you, it will require groups all around the world, in all the countries, but we have to achieve, because it's a very symbolic fight for the entire planet. It's a fight that is inviting everybody through educated choices to be a beneficial participant to heal the planet, for planetary health. And right now we are fighting such corporations which are the opposite. They're a toxic participant to the entropic death of our planet. And if we win fights like this, and in a united way, I can imagine saving those last primary forests. And just have in mind that picture with the bears in the tree, or any corner of nature around the world where you have been and you just fell in love with it. So I'm saying, if nature can be so beautiful, imagine human civilization in full bloom. And let's try to soften this terrible future ahead of us by design instead of disaster. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Gabriel.
Thank you so much, Gabriel PAUN. Now we are going to extend our panel here. I really have the feeling that this is a very special moment. A very special moment. It is important for our emotional balance. Now we will talk with a forest biologist from Dürnstein and Lassingtal, Vienna. We will have her on stage together with a woman who founded the EARTHtalks, and she's the driving engine behind this event. A most cordial welcome to Angie, Rattay and Nina Schönemann. Please come on stage. Please join us on stage. Thank you so much. I'm going to provide you with microphones. Nina, let's talk about the last primeval forest of Austria, in and around which you are allowed to work. Well, first of all, so let's put it like that. I read an interview that you gave where you said that the life cycle of a tree can be 1,000 years in an ideal world. So this means also that forests are not equal. Forests differ a great deal. First of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's a big honor to speak here. What most people do not know is that they do not know near natural forests. Not many of us have visited near natural forests, because most of us, if you step outside, well, most of us know managed forests basically. So this means that there has been a great deal of human intervention. So most trees have been planted by humans, and humans have decided which kinds of trees, which species of trees are harvested. And spruces, for example, harvested at a very young age, 70 years, and in our region, spruces grow to become 600 to 800 years, and then they are contained in the ecosystem for 200 years as dead wood, so it takes about 1,000 years in order to complete a tree's life cycle. And This is completely different if you compare it with a managed forest. And so you have to understand that a forest is not the sum of its trees. Most of us think, if you think about a forest, it's only about trees. But basically, a forest is an ecosystem, a highly complex system. And this means that there is an interaction between individual organisms, and this is much more essential than every individual player. So we could cite the following example. I cannot describe everything because we are lacking time. So there is an interplay between trees and the mycorrhiza of fungi, where trees produce sugar during photosynthesis that the fungus gets from the tree. So the root system joins forces with the fungal system, and nutrients so are provided. So there is a symbiosis of sorts. They need each other, they necessitate each other in order for the system to work out perfectly. And this is what is at stake in this ecosystem: interaction, connectedness. A primeval forest means the following. We have a very strict definition for this. So, since the last big disruption of the Ice Age, away from the blank rock, a forest came into being. And this interplay of living organisms without any human intervention was so important, and there was never a ubiquitous intervention like a clear cut where living organisms died off. And also the residual organisms in the soil, so it gets partly that hot due to solar irradiation, so that the biggest part of living organisms die off. And if you replant trees, then these are individual players, so to speak, and you cannot compare these with the ecosystems where everything is connected to each other. And this is why forests, there are big differences between forests. And the highest priority that we currently have is to retain primeval forests, because they are irretrievable. So many organisms are irretrievable. Even if we wait for a long time, if we have old forests, it takes such a long time until symbioses come into being. And our highest priority is to protect these forests. And also in the managed forest, we can learn a lot from near natural forest. We have to protect the soil life, and also strengthen diversity by allowing for many important structures, deadwood, for example. Who wants to support your project is well advised to enter into a partnership with you. How does it look like in concrete terms? How can you become a climate partner? We have started an initiative, Climate Partnership, Klimapartnerschaft.at, where together with companies and private individuals and forest owners, we give areas, forest areas, back to nature for €1.20 per square meter, and these services in the long term are being given back. So we said that we want to take them out of forestry use for at least 80 years, and we want to give them back to nature so that ecosystem services become possible again, because we have to use resources. We need these resources in order to secure our livelihood, but we have to be highly careful how we do it and where we do it. And with every use, we make ecosystems weaker, and ecosystems services constitute our very livelihood. If we would do a survey whether for next week we want to have enough drinking water or enough air for being able to breathe, or whether planning of leisure time is more important, everyone would go for the most important things, of course. But no one takes resources in their hands in order to protect just that, because it has always been a matter of course. And so it is so important to set the priorities differently. So we have to value these ecosystem services, and we have to act accordingly.
Thank you, Nina, for providing us with those insights. for the Dürnstein-Lassenthal region. Gabriel, I wanted to let you breathe, but there's one question I would like to ask you. You spoke about the disaster by design, and this is something we heard from all speakers today. The future doesn't look rosy, so we have a psychological problem, because many of us will probably go home, deeply moved by what they heard here, maybe also activated, and then we have the next family party, and I think we all have an uncle like that who says, in good old Austrian, who gives a damn, what can I do? Or whatever, finds an excuse not to do anything. So how can you get the message across in this tiny circle of your own family or friends?
Danke für deine Frage.
Well, thank you for this question.
Gave a few examples, perhaps they were too general, but yeah, the question is how you deal with a person like the old uncle or grandfather, whatever he was. There are many people like that. It's difficult. It's not easy. It's not easy because it's these are the category of denials. They deny the problem because of their own comfort, I believe. It's very difficult to make choices which makes you feel uncomfortable and makes you give up your normal way of being. Nothing from all I said was easy to do. I mean, I was speaking about every very big things. Plan a smaller family. What a debate. Yeah.
So is it
take animals off your plate or eat less animal. All these things are big, but you can think about it.
Is
And
leading by example? Is that the solution? Jetzt fange ich schon eingeschrien an.
Leading by example is okay, but it's not enough. I think the conversation is completely shifting in the public space or in the private space when you speak about the benefits of all these things. What are the benefits for me, for my health, for the animal, and for the climate, and for biodiversity if I just stop eating them? What are the benefits for my well-being and for the planet if I plan to have one child instead of two? I mean, I can immediately think of, I mean, I know it's a very sensitive thing, but if you put it with the benefits and the advantages of all these things, the whole thing is changing because you start thinking, not fighting, but thinking. And thinking is all we have to do with everything that we know and we can. Let's say 3 kids instead of 4. You can still go with a 5 people's car. You don't need a van. You can give them better education because you need less money for that. You can give them bio food to all of them. They can make extracurricular activities. They can learn cello or piano or make a sport. You go less time to the hospital. You wake up less times in the middle of the night. See, so suddenly, our well-being is also important. Everything starts from advantages of whatever choice you make, regardless if it's animals in the plate, smaller family, choose to transport electric, think about a supplier of your energy that is from wind and sun and not something else. Sun, the wonderful star, the only thing that produces energy in our solar system, every single second, 4.5 trillion equivalent of atomic bombs. That's a lot. In 1 hour we get from our sun the energy we consume in an entire year. On Earth we produce nothing. We only consume and excrete until it's all gone. So perhaps we have to look back to the sun.
Danke für diese Beispiele.
Thank you for these wonderful examples. It is very nice to also see the cultural differences. He says it's a sensitive topic when we talk about having 2 kids or 1. Well, for the Austrians, it's the schnitzel. We know that there's also a big problem, a very dangerous topic. Angie, let's go for the final stretch. Are you happy? Well, as happy as you can see in such dangerous political times. Well, let's try with a more detailed question, and I'm hoping for a more detailed answer. Why should we go back to the roots? Well, because movements always start from below, from the bottom up. The biggest movements were bottom-up movements. It was mostly simple people who simply had enough. Citizens who would no longer put up with that, who joined grassroots movements. That's why they're called that, grassroots. And back to the roots, well, when I think about roots and about children, well, nobody is born and wants to destroy a forest, or nobody is born on this planet and wants to, well, see animals suffer or pollute the oceans. And that takes me to the next idea that Lina shared with us, namely that activists very often are seen as being alarmists because they are pointing to these problems. They are portrayed as being radicals. And funnily enough, one of our team pointed to the fact that radical comes from roots, radix. So we should go back to the roots. And I think it takes a lot more radical movements in a positive sense. So we need, well, it's the wrong people who benefit, and we can't really do them this favor to let them go ahead with it. Well, 15 years ago, you stood up and you said, we need to do something. You created the EARTHtalks. Looking back on the past 15 years, has enough happened in the meantime? Yes or no? I think that a lot of activists like myself, I can only speak for myself, of course, they have developed this productive anger. In the announcement of the EARTHtalks, and also during the election campaign, I noticed it time and again because they always talked about the climate issue, which isn't so en vogue now, so sexy, and I think this is really an absurd debate. It's as if you were to tell me, well, saving humanity is not en vogue. So what are we talking about? This is so absurd. Nobody can take this seriously, such a statement. And I think that, like Gabriel said, we don't need to die fighting, but we need to fight, and we can't stop fighting. We simply need to make sure that we bring everybody we know on board. We need all hands on deck, and we need to make sure that our movement keeps growing and becomes stronger, because we are the many, and that's much stronger than the evil people in this world have by way of numbers. Well, I'll let you go with this productive anger. You can watch the last few minutes from the first row. Thank you very much. And now we'll do one last round with the three of you. I would like to hear from you in maybe just 1 minute the takeaway message. So what should every individual here do? If it's just one thing they can do, what is it? Who would like to start? Gabriel?
I think I'm going to pass to the next one.
Ben!
I think if we can tie some of the things that people have said together, I think what it's about is a right relationship. So living ecologically means living in a right relationship with the earth and with each other. And that means everything from parenting your children so that they understand about the things that are happening, the world that they're coming to be born into, the importance of our reliance on what's called ecosystem services, but let's just call it life, all the way to, when questions come up like boycotting IKEA or calling out the Swedish government or signing petitions for the proper implementation of EU regulations, that is living well. That is living ecologically. That is living responsibly. So for me, it's about embracing that, enjoying that, feeling confident and happy in that place to say, I am right, I am living in right relationship, this is wrong, and these are the things that I'm doing and choosing, actively choosing. And then you're not in a defensive position saying to people, okay, fine, you want to continue logging forests because you make these arguments about jobs and so on. Let's have a conversation about jobs. And my role is to ask questions, to be an inquiring, responsible citizen with a strong sense of ethics. So for me, it's about being ecological. We need to raise ecological children. We need to be ecological citizens. We need to try and build an ecological society. And that does come down to everybody. It's not just consumer choices, but it's also about that, how we act in that wider sense, so politically as well.
So I gave away my minute, right? No.
Nein, du kannst gern nachholen.
You're welcome to make your statement now.
Very, very short one.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's the phrase which I use at the end with a kind request for everyone. I said, imagine humanity in full bloom if nature can be so beautiful. I'm just going to repeat that, and I'm kindly inviting you to try imagine it your way and do something about it in a daily basis. Thank you.
Lina.
Oh, we live in a world of wars and fascism and genocide and ecocide, etc. We see how we are in the midst of human rights crisis, environmental crisis, and climate crisis, and all of this is interlinked. And all of these forces that I just mentioned, we think of them as active, and then peace often as passive. And I would like to underline that hope, democracy, peace is active. It's a verb. I feel the moral obligation to create hope. And I said it in my speech, and I can say it again. When you start to take action, your life becomes very much aligned. And there are no rules and no laws to really protect biodiversity or keeping the carbon in the ground. So we cannot save lives by playing by the rules. The rules needs to change, so we need to rebel.
Dann sagen wir ein letztes.
Okay, so we'd like to say thank you to our three speakers of this evening, LINA, Ben, and GABRIEL. Thank you very much. I believe that humanity can still turn things around in time, that we live in unity and together strive for happiness. That's what I want on earth. That the animal kingdom will survive and that we don't realize much too late how much we are messing up. That the plant world survives and we don't realize much too late that we alone are not enough to survive. I firmly believe in a better world where no one has much more money than they need. And I believe in a world where there is no poverty. Yes, I believe in that too. And we celebrate together the end of the world as it was yesterday. Have you heard the news? We're building a new one. Grass grows where there used to be tar. There is no power for anyone anymore. Money flies through the air like colorful paper. It has no value in a world without greed. Come, let us celebrate together the end of time as it was yesterday. Today it's time we celebrate together the end of the end. There's a lot to do. Let's spit in our hands. I can already see it before me. This world is clear to me. I paint it, I hold it fast, and I sing of it. We hold hands, the flags are laid down, we breathe fresh air, we've turned it round for the better. The world is blooming, we with us in harmony, we find meaning in being, no longer in having salt and wind on my skin, robbed of all my fears. I hear them ask, do we want to dare a new world? Because I firmly believe in a better world in which hatred has no place. And I believe in a world in which there is no war. Yes, I believe in that too. And we celebrate together the end of the world as it was yesterday. Have you heard the news? We're building a new one. Grass grows where there was once tar. There's no power for anyone anymore. Money flies through the air as colorful paper. It has no value in a world without greed. Come, let's celebrate together the end of time as it was yesterday. Today it's time to celebrate together the end of the end. There's a lot to do. Let's spit in our hands. Laura Braun, the winner of the FM4 Protest Song Contest. I think you know the job. Follow her on all channels, go to her concerts, stream everything that she publishes. So I would like to say thank you to all our volunteers who are helping to make this Earth Talks possible. So I'd like to thank all our volunteers. Please join us on the stage. We'll have a group picture, the volunteers of Earth Talks 2024. This is your moment. A big thank you goes to all our partners and sponsors, all companies and NGOs who are making this possible. And if you're asking yourselves, how can I chip in? What can I do to support this? We'll do the networking, and there's a lot of donation boxes that are used for the Earth Talks directly, so you can help us by donating. So tomorrow this picture will be on Angie Rattay's mantelpiece. So give us a friendly smile. I would like to say thank you to all volunteers. And now This is the invitation for part 2 of the Earth Talks, because now we are going to open the networking event.
Und wir feiern gemeinsam das Ende der Zeit, wie sie gestern auch war. Heute ist es soweit. Komm, wir feiern gemeinsam das Ende vom Ende. Es gibt viel zu tun. Komm, spuck in die Hände.